It was another ordinary day at the remote military base, where the hum of helicopters and the sharp sounds of gunfire filled the air. The sun was just starting to climb above the distant mountains, casting long shadows over the training grounds. Soldiers were moving with purpose, their boots hitting the ground in steady rhythm, rifles slung across their shoulders or carried with the kind of familiarity that only years of training can bring. The base was alive with activity, and yet, amidst all the chaos, there was a strange sense of order. Each person had a role, a duty, a task to complete. The SEAL commander, a tall man with years of experience and a reputation for being both strict and sharp, strode across the grounds. He had seen hundreds of soldiers come and go, and in his line of work, he had learned to recognize excellence almost instinctively. His eyes scanned the training areas, noting who was following instructions perfectly, who was struggling, and who seemed to stand out from the rest. Normally, it didn't take much to spot someone remarkable, but today something, or rather someone, caught his attention in a way that was unusual. He noticed her at the far end of the weapons bay, sitting alone on a small crate. Unlike the others who were rushing about, checking targets or running drills, she was calm, focused, and entirely absorbed in what she was doing. In front of her lay a massive weapon, a Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle. It was intimidating, almost as long as her torso, and most soldiers treated it with a mix of respect and trepidation. But she handled it like it was an extension of her own body. Her hands moved carefully over the metal, cleaning every inch, checking every mechanism, tightening and polishing each part with precision. There was no hurry, no display of bravado, only a quiet, deliberate dedication to her task. The commander found himself pausing, almost unconsciously. He had seen countless soldiers maintain their weapons, but there was something different about her. It wasn't just skill, it was the way she moved, the patience she showed, and the almost meditative focus she seemed to have. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, scanned every detail of the rifle, ensuring nothing was out of place. Every movement was deliberate, each action measured. There was a quiet confidence in her posture, a sense that she knew exactly what she was doing and why it mattered. He walked closer, careful not to startle her. Other soldiers noticed her as well, some nodding respectfully, others whispering among themselves. Rumors about her abilities had circulated quietly through the base, but no one openly talked about them, at least not yet. The commander had always believed in assessing people for himself, not relying on hearsay. Still, as he observed her, he felt a rare mix of curiosity and admiration. There was an aura about her, a quiet strength that seemed to radiate from the way she handled the massive weapon with such ease. Despite the noise of the base, the clanging of metal, shouted instructions, the distant thud of gunfire, she remained undisturbed. It was as if the world around her had disappeared, leaving only her and the rifle. The commander couldn't help but think about the countless hours of practice and dedication it must have taken to reach this level of mastery. This wasn't someone who had just learned the basics. This was someone who had spent years refining every small skill, every movement, every decision. It was evident in the way she worked. Meticulous, methodical, and completely in control. There was also a subtle sense of discipline in the way she arranged her cleaning materials, laying out each tool with care, making sure everything was within reach. The barrel, the bolt, the scope, everything was checked and polished to perfection. The commander had handled many Barretts in his life, and he knew how easily mistakes could happen when cleaning such a powerful weapon. But there she was, almost serene, treating a machine built for extreme precision with the kind of respect reserved for sacred objects. For a moment, the commander simply watched. He had seen plenty of impressive soldiers in his career, but rarely had someone caught his attention purely through their focus and quiet command of a task. Most soldiers made their skill obvious through action, fast reflexes, loud commands, or impressive feats. But this woman didn't need to prove anything. Her competence was clear in the way she moved, and that silent confidence made her stand out far more than any loud display ever could. It was in that moment, as he observed her carefully cleaning the Barrett, that he began to realize there was more to this soldier than met the eye. Something about her hinted at extraordinary skill, something that went far beyond ordinary training. And though he didn't yet know the full story, a small seed of curiosity had been planted in his mind. A curiosity that would soon grow into astonishment when the truth about her abilities was revealed. The SEAL commander could not stop thinking about her. Even as he walked away from the weapons bay, his eyes kept drifting back to the woman cleaning the Barrett .50. There was something unusual about her, something that set her apart from every soldier he had ever seen. Most soldiers, even the best, carried a certain intensity, an almost visible edge, but she had a quiet calm, a patience that seemed almost impossible in such a high-stress environment. Her movements were deliberate, smooth, and controlled, yet there was a power behind them that suggested she could handle any situation without breaking a sweat. He decided to observe her more closely over the next few days. From a distance, he watched how she interacted with the other soldiers. Surprisingly, she didn't seem eager to show off or gain recognition. She spoke when spoken to, answered questions politely, and offered help when asked. Yet, no one could ignore the aura of competence that surrounded her. There was an invisible line she seemed to draw between herself and the rest of the base, not one of arrogance, but of focus. She was completely in her own world when it came to her craft, and it was clear that her skills were far beyond ordinary. One afternoon, curiosity finally got the better of him. He walked over to her while she was sitting on the crate, cleaning the rifle. The sun was low, casting a warm glow across the weapons bay, and dust motes floated lazily in the air. The commander noticed the faint concentration lines on her forehead, the steady rhythm of her hands moving over the rifle. Most soldiers would have rushed through the cleaning process, eager to move on to drills or exercises. But she didn't rush. Every movement had purpose. Every action was precise. It was as if she understood the weapon not just as a tool, but as a part of herself. A piece of machinery that required respect, attention, and discipline. "Mind if I ask you something?" he said, keeping his voice casual, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with a calm intensity. There was no fear, no nervousness, just a quiet awareness that made him pause. "Of course," she replied softly. He crouched slightly to get a better view of her work. "I've seen a lot of soldiers clean their weapons, but no one does it with this level of focus. How long have you been doing this?" She smiled faintly, not arrogantly, but almost shyly. "I started years ago," she said. "It's more than just cleaning a rifle. It's understanding it. Every part, every detail. If you know your weapon, it becomes an extension of you." Her words struck him. Most soldiers would have shrugged, given a simple answer, or even joked about it. But her reply carried weight. There was intelligence behind the calm, a deep understanding that came only from years of training, experience, and perhaps a natural gift. He began to wonder what else she might be capable of, what other skills she might have that were hidden behind this quiet exterior. Over the next hour, he watched her work. She adjusted the scope, oiled the barrel, checked the bolt, and polished every part with meticulous care. The commander knew the Barrett .50 was not an easy weapon to handle. It required strength, patience, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. Yet she made it look effortless. The rifle, a powerful machine capable of extreme precision, seemed almost delicate in her hands. There was a rhythm to her movements, a calmness that contrasted sharply with the rest of the base's hustle and bustle. As he observed, he noticed the way other soldiers reacted. Some tried not to stare, unsure how to respond to her presence. Others whispered quietly among themselves, curious but respectful. It was clear she had earned a quiet reputation, even if she didn't openly acknowledge it. The commander realized that her skill had an impact beyond just her own work. It inspired a sense of respect and even awe in those around her. For the first time in a long while, the commander felt genuinely intrigued by someone in his unit. He had seen elite soldiers, trained sharpshooters, and hardened veterans, but rarely had he encountered someone whose competence was so quietly, effortlessly visible. Most people made noise to show their skill. She made none. Her actions spoke for themselves. Finally, as the sun dipped closer to the horizon, he decided to speak again. "I have to ask. You don't just clean the weapon for practice, do you?" he said, half joking, half serious. She looked up, her expression calm but serious. No, she replied simply. You have to know your weapon inside out if you want to use it well. If you rush or ignore details, it can fail when it matters most. Her answer hit him with a quiet force. It was a lesson in focus, discipline, and mastery. Here was a soldier who approached every task, no matter how small, with the same seriousness as a mission. It was a level of dedication that most people could only dream of achieving. And it was obvious she had not just learned it. She embodied it. That day, the commander walked away with a growing sense of admiration. He didn't yet know the full story. He didn't know about her record or the unbelievable skill that lay hidden behind her calm exterior. But one thing was clear. This woman was extraordinary. He would have to learn more, not just about her skills, but about the person behind them. And somehow, he knew this was only the beginning of discovering something truly remarkable. The next morning, the air around the base was cool and sharp. The sky was still half dark, with streaks of orange showing on the horizon. Soldiers were already busy preparing for another long day of training, but the SEAL commander's thoughts were somewhere else. Ever since his short talk with the quiet woman cleaning the Barrett .50, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Something about her calmness and quiet confidence had stayed with him. It wasn't common to meet someone who carried such strength without saying much. He decided it was time to talk to her properly, to know who she really was. When he reached the weapons bay, she was already there, sitting in the same spot, working on the same rifle. The Barrett lay across her lap, its metal glinting under the soft morning light. She was checking the scope this time, adjusting it carefully. Her movements were steady and practiced, as if she had done this thousands of times before. The commander approached, stopping a few steps away. "You start early," he said with a small smile. She looked up briefly and nodded. "The earlier I start, the more I can focus before the noise begins." He chuckled quietly. "Smart," he said, pulling up a nearby crate and sitting down. For a few moments they worked in silence. She on her rifle and he just watching, trying to understand her. "You handle that Barrett like it's part of you," he finally said. "Most people are scared to even lift it." "It's a powerful weapon," she replied, her voice calm. "You respect it and it respects you. Fear doesn't help when you're holding something like this." Her words were simple, but they carried meaning. The commander found himself nodding. He had trained many soldiers who tried to show off their strength or speed, but she was different. She didn't show off because she didn't need to. Her confidence came from knowledge and experience, not pride. He leaned forward slightly. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" She hesitated for a moment, her hands pausing mid-motion. Then she spoke quietly. "I started when I was very young. My father was a hunter. He taught me how to aim, how to breathe, how to be patient. Later, I joined the military. I found out I was good at long-range shooting. I guess it just stayed with me." The commander smiled. "Being good is one thing, but the way you handle that rifle, that's something else. You've got skill most people only dream of." She didn't react much, just gave a small shrug. "It's not about skill. It's about control. You can't rush a shot. You can't let emotions decide for you. You wait, you breathe, and when the time comes, you trust yourself." Her tone was calm but full of quiet conviction. The commander could tell these weren't just words. This was how she lived. She understood that precision and patience were more powerful than aggression. For a while, they just talked about small things, training, weapons, the challenges of missions. She answered every question honestly, never bragging, never hiding behind pride. Her simplicity made her even more impressive. The commander realized that while many soldiers talked loudly about what they could do, she let her actions do the talking. As their conversation went on, he began to see a glimpse of the person behind the soldier. She spoke about long nights in the field, about learning to read wind direction, and how even a small mistake could mean missing a target by meters. She spoke with respect about every mission she had been on, never taking full credit, always mentioning her team. It was clear she had discipline but also humility, something rare among elite soldiers. At one point, the commander asked her, "Do you ever get nervous before a shot?" She thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. Always. The day you stop feeling anything is the day you stop being careful. The trick is to let the nerves sharpen your focus, not destroy it. He couldn't help but admire her answer. She had turned fear into fuel, nerves into precision. There was wisdom in her simplicity, something he found deeply inspiring. Just as their conversation was slowing, another soldier walked by, carrying a training report. He stopped, looked at the commander, then at her and smiled. "Sir, do you know who she is?" he asked with a tone of awe. The commander frowned slightly. "I know she's a damn good sniper," he replied. The soldier chuckled. "Good? She's the best we've got. She's the one who made that 3,347-meter shot overseas." He gave a respectful nod to her and walked away. The commander froze for a second. He looked at her, searching her face for a reaction, but she just kept cleaning the rifle like nothing had happened. 3,347 meters? He repeated slowly. She looked up, eyes steady. "Yes," she said simply. That was a long day. He was speechless. That distance was almost unbelievable, one of the longest confirmed sniper kills in the world. It required perfect calculation, perfect timing, and nerves of steel. And yet, she spoke about it as if it was just another part of her work. In that moment, the commander realized why she was different. Her calm wasn't ordinary. Her focus wasn't just discipline, it was mastery. She didn't need praise or attention. She had achieved something almost impossible and carried it with quiet grace. As the sun rose higher and the base came alive with drills and noise, the commander sat silently for a while, still processing what he had just learned. She went back to polishing the rifle, her expression as calm as ever. He finally stood, giving her a respectful nod. "I think I understand now," he said softly. "You don't just shoot. You become the shot." She gave a faint smile. "Something like that," she replied. And with that, she returned to her work, the metal of the Barrett gleaming under the morning light, just like the quiet legend she truly was. The commander couldn't stop thinking about what he had just learned. A 3,347-meter kill shot. He had heard stories about such impossible distances, but never from someone sitting quietly in his own unit, cleaning her weapon as if nothing extraordinary had happened. That kind of shot wasn't luck. It was the kind of precision that came from years of training, experience, and an almost unshakable mind. He knew snipers who struggled at half that distance. And yet, here she was, speaking of it like it was just another day in the field. That evening, after the training drills were done and the base had grown quieter, the commander found himself in his office, reading through her file. He flipped through the pages slowly, his brow furrowed in concentration. Her record was clean, almost too clean, commendations, missions, successful operations, all written in simple, emotionless language. But one line stood out to him. Confirmed long-range engagement, 3,347 meters, hostile target neutralized. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Incredible," he murmured. There were only a handful of snipers in history who had managed such a distance. And most of them were men whose names had become legends in military circles. But she had never mentioned it. Not once. Not even hinted. The next morning, when he saw her again, she was out on the shooting range, testing the Barrett .50 under the rising sun. The range stretched far across the desert-like landscape, targets lined up in the distance. A few soldiers had gathered to watch her shoot, whispering quietly among themselves. The commander joined them, folding his arms as he watched. She lay flat on the ground, her body perfectly aligned behind the rifle. Through his binoculars, he could see her eyes locked onto the scope, her breathing slow and steady. The air was still. Even the usual bass noise seemed to fade. Then, with a soft click, she fired. The Barrett thundered, the sound echoing through the open air. A moment later, the distant target shattered dead center. A murmur of disbelief spread among the soldiers. She reloaded, adjusted her scope, and fired again. Another perfect hit. And another. Every shot was the same. Precise, calm, exact. It was like watching an artist paint with sound and motion instead of brushes. When she stood up, brushing the dust from her uniform, the commander approached her. "That was some of the best shooting I've ever seen," he said, still a little in awe. She smiled politely. "It's all about focus," she replied. "And patience." He shook his head slightly. "Focus and patience are one thing. What you did out there and what I read in your file, that's something else entirely." She seemed a little surprised. "You read it?" "I did," he said. "That 3,347-meter shot, you made history with that. Why didn't you ever mention it?" Her expression softened. For a moment, she looked past him, her eyes distant, as if remembering something. "Because it's not something to brag about," she said quietly. "Every shot like that, it changes something inside you. It's not just about distance or record. It's about what it took to get there." He could tell there was a story behind her words, something heavy. "What happened that day?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then finally spoke. "It was a long mission. We were positioned in the mountains watching a convoy far below. The target was dangerous, someone responsible for many lives lost. We waited almost 8 hours for the right shot. The wind kept changing, the light kept fading. Most people would have given up." Her voice stayed calm, but the memory in her eyes told him how difficult it had been. "When the moment finally came," she continued, "everything felt still. My hands stopped shaking. My breathing slowed. It was like time froze, and then I took the shot." The commander listened silently, completely drawn in. "The bullet traveled almost 10 seconds before it hit," she said softly. "That's a long time when you're watching through a scope. You see everything, the dust, the light, even the heat waves. And when it's over, you feel both relief and something else. Something hard to explain." She stopped speaking, her gaze lowering for a moment. The commander understood. It wasn't just a story of skill, it was one of responsibility. Every sniper lived with the weight of their choices, and hers was heavier than most. He nodded slowly. "That's remarkable. You must know how rare that is." "I know," she said simply. "But records don't matter much when you're out there. You only think about the mission, the people you're protecting. The rest, it doesn't mean anything if you can't sleep at night." Her words hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't proud of her record. She was humbled by it. That was what made her different from the others. Most soldiers sought recognition or medals, but she carried her achievements like a quiet burden. The commander looked at her with new respect. "You know," he said after a moment, "I've met hundreds of soldiers, but I've never met one like you. You don't just have skill, you have balance. The kind of balance most people never find." She smiled faintly, a hint of gratitude in her expression. "Balance is what keeps you alive," she said, "and what keeps you human." As they stood there, the sound of the wind sweeping across the range filled the silence between them. The commander realized that her story wasn't just about being a great sniper. It was about strength, patience, and the quiet price of perfection. She had done something nearly impossible, yet carried it with humility and grace. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the commander wrote a note in his logbook. "There's more to greatness than what's written in a file. Sometimes, it hides in silence, behind calm eyes and steady hands." And somewhere out on the range, under the fading light, she was still cleaning her Barrett .50, just as she always did, quietly, patiently, as if every detail mattered. The commander couldn't forget her words. That quiet strength, that calm voice explaining how she waited 8 hours for one perfect shot. It stayed with him. He had met brave soldiers, skilled shooters, and even legends, but none had her kind of focus. He decided he wanted to see her in action again. Not just as an observer this time, but as a teammate. The next morning, as the sun was still soft and golden, he called for a special training exercise. It was designed for the most advanced soldiers, an intense sniper simulation that tested patience, teamwork, and precision. When her name appeared on the list, she simply nodded and began preparing her rifle. No questions, no hesitation. That was her way. The training field stretched across a wide, uneven desert area. Targets were placed at different distances, some close, some so far they were almost invisible to the naked eye. The goal was simple: identify, calculate, and eliminate all targets in record time. But this wasn't just about shooting, it was about reading the wind, calculating the angle, and keeping steady under pressure. As the commander watched her set up, he noticed her quiet routine again. She checked the scope twice, adjusted the bipod, and then laid down flat against the ground. Around her, other soldiers moved quickly, talking, laughing nervously. But she stayed silent, her eyes scanning the horizon, already calculating. The commander took a position beside her. "You ready?" he asked. She gave a small nod, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Always." When the signal sounded, the field came alive with noise, rifles firing, soldiers shouting coordinates, dust rising in the air. But her side of the range was calm. Through the scope, her world became silent and narrow, focused only on the target miles away. "Target at 1,000 meters, she said quietly. The commander adjusted his binoculars to follow her line of sight. The target was a metal plate shaped like a human silhouette, hidden partly behind a small hill. She made a few small adjustments to her rifle, breathed in slowly, and fired. The Barrett roared, and a second later, the sound of the bullet striking metal echoed back. Perfect hit. The commander couldn't help but smile. "You make it look easy." "It's not," she said, loading another round. "You just learn to make it feel that way." They moved through the targets together, he spotting, she shooting. At every stage, her calm never wavered. When wind picked up, she adjusted her aim before he even mentioned it. When the sun shifted, she recalibrated without pause. It was like watching someone dance with precision and purpose. Every movement had meaning. At one point, the commander tried to test her skill. He pointed to a nearly invisible target at 2,800 meters, far beyond what most snipers would attempt in a simulation. "What do you think?" he asked with a grin. She looked through her scope, her expression unreadable. "It's possible," she said softly. "Possible." She didn't answer right away. She adjusted her scope, checked the wind flag, and measured the angle of the hill. Then, without a word, she exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The echo took a while to return, but when it did, it came with the faint clang of metal. Direct hit. The commander blinked, half in disbelief, half in admiration. "You just proved your record wasn't luck." She smiled faintly. "Luck doesn't last 10 seconds in the air." The other soldiers began to take notice. Word spread quickly across the field that she had hit the farthest target perfectly. Soon, a small group gathered behind them, watching her work in quiet awe. Yet she didn't change. She didn't look around or acknowledge the whispers. Her focus remained exactly where it was, on the next target. When the exercise ended, her team had cleared every target faster and more accurately than any group before. The commander turned to her, shaking his head in amazement. "You've just rewritten the standard for precision training," he said. She wiped the dust off her hands and gave a small shrug. "It's all about control. The rifle does the work. You just have to listen to it." Later, as the team packed up, the commander couldn't help but notice the effect she had on everyone. The younger soldiers, who had started the day full of noise and competition, were now quiet, thoughtful. Watching her had taught them something deeper than shooting. It taught them discipline, patience, and humility, the true marks of a professional. That evening, the commander called her to his office. She entered, standing straight but relaxed. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "What you showed out there today, it reminded everyone what mastery looks like." She gave a small smile. "Thank you, sir. I just did my job." He leaned back, studying her. "You did more than that. You taught people without saying a word. You reminded them that greatness doesn't need noise." She hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "When you work with something as powerful as this," she nodded toward her rifle, "you learn that silence is strength. The moment you start showing off, you start losing control." Her words stayed with him long after she left. He wrote them down in his notebook later that night. Silence is strength. It was a simple sentence, but it captured everything about her. The way she moved, spoke, worked, and inspired. For the next few days, the commander noticed a change around the base. The other soldiers seemed calmer, more focused. Even during drills, there was less chatter and more precision. Her example had quietly reshaped the entire atmosphere. And though she never sought attention, everyone knew they had witnessed something special. She wasn't just another sniper. She was the kind of soldier who made everyone around her better simply by being herself. When the commander saw her again later that week, cleaning the Barrett .50 under the fading light, he realized that she didn't need medals or titles. Her legacy was already being written. In every shot she fired, every soldier she inspired, and every quiet moment where her calm strength spoke louder than words ever could. After the special training exercise, things on the base began to change. News spread fast, faster than the commander expected. At first, it was just whispers in the mess hall and casual talk in the training yard. But soon, everyone on the base seemed to know about the quiet sniper who had hit every target with impossible accuracy. Soldiers who hadn't even seen her in person spoke about her like she was a legend come to life. The commander watched this shift happen day by day. The same men who once bragged about their own shooting skills now lowered their voices when she walked by. The younger soldiers, who had once been restless and overconfident, began copying her calm and focused manner. She had become a quiet example, someone who showed what true discipline looked like, without ever giving a speech or demanding attention. But she didn't act any differently. Every morning, she arrived at the training field early, same as always. She cleaned her Barrett .50 with the same patience, double-checked her scope, and worked through her routines without a trace of pride. It was as if the fame, the whispers, and the growing admiration meant nothing to her. For her, it was still about the craft, about the work, about the precision. One day, the commander found her alone again, this time sitting on a small bench near the firing range. The sky was cloudy, and the wind was sharp. She was adjusting the barrel alignment of her rifle, lost in thought. He approached and said with a grin, "You know, you've become a bit of a celebrity around here." She looked up, a small, almost embarrassed smile forming on her face. "Celebrity?" she repeated. "I think you're exaggerating, sir." He laughed. "Not at all. Everyone's talking about your shooting. You've inspired half the base to train harder." She shrugged lightly. "If they're training harder, that's good. But I didn't do anything special. I just did what I've always done." That humility struck him again. Here was a soldier who had broken a world-class record, impressed an entire base, and still spoke as if it were nothing. He sat beside her for a moment, watching her work in silence. "You know," he said finally, "what makes you stand out isn't just your skill. It's how you carry it. Most people would let the attention get to their head." She tightened a screw on the rifle and replied softly, "Attention fades. Skill doesn't. And neither does discipline." Her words hit him with quiet truth. It was the kind of wisdom that came not from books or briefings, but from long experience earned through challenges most people couldn't even imagine. Over the next few weeks, her reputation continued to grow. The commander noticed how even senior officers began treating her differently. They spoke to her with more respect, often asking her opinion during training sessions or technical briefings. She never tried to lead, yet somehow people naturally followed her example. One afternoon, the base commander himself, a tough man known for his strictness, came down to the range to observe her shooting. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd had gathered. She didn't seem to notice or care about the attention. She went through her routine calmly, lying down, setting her scope, and firing. Every bullet found its mark. The sound of each hit echoed like proof of perfection. When she stood up, the base commander nodded with clear respect. "Outstanding work," he said firmly. "It's not often we see skill like this, especially from someone so composed." She simply replied, "Thank you, sir," and began unloading her rifle. No smile, no pride, no sign of ego. Just quiet professionalism. Later that evening, the SEAL commander met her in the cafeteria. She was sitting alone, eating quietly. He sat across from her with his tray. "You know," he said, "I've been watching how people react to you lately. You've changed the entire mood of this base." She looked up, a little puzzled. How do you mean? Before, he explained, this place was loud. Everyone wanted to prove themselves. Now it's different. It's quieter, more focused. People are trying to match your discipline. You've set a new standard, and you didn't even have to say a word. For a moment, she was silent. Then she said softly, I'm glad if that's true. But all I did was what every soldier should do. Focus on their job. He smiled. Maybe. But sometimes one person doing their job right reminds everyone else how it should be done. She looked down for a moment, as if thinking about his words. I guess I just never thought of it that way, she said quietly. I've always believed that respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn through consistency. That single sentence stayed in the commander's mind long after. Respect is earned through consistency. It was simple, yet it explained everything about her. She didn't need recognition because her actions spoke for her. She had earned respect by simply being excellent every single day. Within weeks, her story spread beyond the base. Other units began hearing about the sniper with the 3,347-meter shot. Reporters even tried to contact the base for confirmation, but she refused interviews. When asked why, she just said, the record isn't what matters. The mission does. That kind of humility made her even more admired. Soldiers from other divisions began writing her name on training boards as motivation. She had become a symbol of quiet excellence, proof that true strength didn't need to shout. One evening, after a long day, the commander found her once again sitting beside her Barrett, cleaning it in the dim light. He watched her for a while, then said softly, You've earned everyone's respect here. She didn't look up immediately. When she finally did, there was a calm smile on her face. Respect is nice, she said, but I'd rather earn trust. Respect fades when people forget you. Trust stays when they remember what you did. The commander nodded slowly. He knew then that she wasn't just a sniper. She was a teacher without realizing it. A quiet mentor. Someone who led not by orders, but by example. As the last bit of sunlight faded behind the mountains, she packed her rifle, stood up, and saluted him before walking away. Watching her go, the commander couldn't help but feel proud. She had come to this base quietly, but now, she had left a mark that no one would ever forget. The night was quiet. The wind brushed softly against the tents, carrying the faint smell of oil and sand. Most of the soldiers were asleep after a long day of drills and training, but inside the command tent, the SEAL commander sat awake, staring at a small file on his desk. The file was thick, filled with papers, reports, and mission logs. But what caught his attention most was the name written neatly on the front. Sergeant Elena Torres. He had read many soldier files in his career, but none had ever made him stop and think the way this one did. Her story was unlike any other. Her past missions were marked with precision. Her evaluations filled with words like exceptional, flawless, unmatched discipline. But what truly stood out wasn't the praise. It was the silence between the lines. There was a mystery around her, something deeper than what the papers could explain. He leaned back in his chair, thinking about the first day he had seen her, quietly cleaning her Barrett .50, lost in focus. Back then, she had seemed like just another soldier doing her job. But now, he realized that moment had been the start of something much bigger. Elena wasn't just a sniper. She was the embodiment of what every soldier hoped to be. Calm, focused, humble, and unshakably loyal. Her presence had changed the rhythm of the base. The commander could feel it in the air. Less noise, more discipline, and a strange sense of pride that ran deeper than before. She had inspired something in them all, something that didn't come from speeches or orders but from quiet example. As he sat there, he couldn't help but wonder what had shaped her. What kind of experiences had taught her to control fear, to move with such patience, to shoot with such deadly accuracy. She never spoke about her past, never bragged about her kills, and never sought recognition. She lived like someone who had seen too much to care about glory. Later that night, he saw the faint light from the firing range still glowing. Curiosity drew him there, and just as he expected, she was there, alone, lying on the ground with her rifle aimed at the distant targets. The cold night wind blew across the sand, but she didn't seem to notice. Her breathing was slow and steady. Through the scope, she was calm, unflinching. He stood quietly for a while, watching her work. Then he finally spoke, his voice low. "You never rest, do you?" She turned her head slightly, smiling faintly. "Rest is for when the mission's over, sir." He walked closer and sat down beside her, watching the horizon. "The mission's never over for people like you," he said softly. She didn't answer immediately. Then, after a long silence, she said, "Maybe that's true, but I've learned something, Commander. It's not about fighting all the time, it's about staying ready. Being calm when others panic. That's how people survive out there." Her words carried a weight that came from experience, from memories that weren't easy to share. The commander could see in her eyes that she had faced moments where everything could have gone wrong. Yet she had stayed steady. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. She nodded. "Why do you do it? What drives you to keep going when most would have stopped a long time ago?" For the first time, she hesitated. Her eyes drifted toward the dark hills, where the sound of wind filled the silence. Then she said quietly, "Because someone has to. When you see what can happen if no one takes the shot, you can't walk away. You stop thinking about medals or fame. You just think about doing what's right. That's all that matters." The commander listened carefully, understanding more in that moment than any report could have told him. Her motivation wasn't pride or orders, it was purpose. She carried it inside her like a flame that never went out. After a long pause, she continued, "You know, sir, people always talk about the 3,347-meter shot. They make it sound like it was luck or magic. But it wasn't. It was a moment. Just one clear, calm second when everything lined up. I didn't think about the distance or the record. I just thought about saving the men in danger. That's all." Her voice was steady, but her eyes had that distant look. The look of someone who had seen too much war and too little peace. The commander nodded slowly. "You know what I think, Torres? That's what makes you different. You don't just aim with your hands. You aim with your heart." A small smile appeared on her face, humble and soft. "Maybe," she said quietly, "but I'm just doing my job." They sat there for a while, in the dark, the sound of the desert wind filling the silence between them. For the first time, the commander felt he truly understood her, not as a soldier under his command, but as a person. She wasn't chasing records or recognition. She was living by a code, a quiet, invisible code that kept her moving forward no matter how heavy the world got. When she finally stood, she slung her rifle over her shoulder and looked at the commander. "You taught us that leadership isn't about shouting orders," she said softly. "It's about standing where you're needed, even when no one's watching. I learned that from you." He smiled faintly. "Funny," he replied. "I was going to say the same thing about you." They shared a quiet moment of respect, soldier to soldier, leader to leader. Then she walked away, her silhouette fading into the shadows, leaving the commander alone with the stars above and the echo of her words. That night, he closed her file for good. Not because her story was over, but because he knew no file could ever capture who she really was. She wasn't just the sniper with the world's longest confirmed kill. She was proof that strength doesn't always shout, it whispers. And long after she left the base, the commander knew he would still remember her. Not for the distance she shot, but for the calm, humble courage she carried wherever she went. Weeks turned into months, and life on the base slowly returned to normal. Missions came and went, new soldiers arrived, and the rhythm of training continued as it always did. But something was different now. The spirit of the base had changed. Calmer, sharper, more focused. The commander could feel it every day in the way his men moved, in how they spoke, in the respect they showed for their duties. Even though she had transferred to another unit, Sergeant Alina Torres's presence still lingered everywhere. Her name was no longer just whispered in admiration. It had become part of the base's story. Her 3,347-meter record was mentioned in training manuals and briefing sessions, not as a tale of fame, but as a lesson in focus, patience, and humility. New recruits heard about her from their instructors before they even touched a rifle. The commander often found himself remembering their last conversation. The one they had under the dark desert sky, when she spoke about duty, not glory. He remembered how calm her voice had been, how sure she was about her purpose. "Someone has to take the shot," she had said. Those words stayed with him. Every time he faced a difficult decision, every time doubt crept in, he thought about her steady hands and her clear eyes behind that rifle scope. Then one morning a letter arrived. It was official, sealed with the insignia of a different military division. He opened it carefully and read the words slowly. It was a report, a confirmation of her latest mission. Alina had been deployed with a special reconnaissance team deep in enemy territory. The operation was dangerous, the kind most soldiers didn't come back from. But she had led her team safely out, neutralizing multiple threats and saving lives. She had done it again, with precision, with courage, with calm. The commander smiled faintly as he read. It didn't surprise him. She had always been the kind of soldier who never missed, whether it was a shot or a decision. A few days later, he gathered his team in the field for training. He stood before them, holding her old Barrett .50. It had been left behind when she transferred, cleaned, oiled, and perfectly maintained, just as she had always kept it. The soldiers stood in silence as he spoke. "Every one of you knows who this rifle belonged to," he began. "Sergeant Torres was one of the finest soldiers to ever serve here. But what made her great wasn't this weapon, or even her record. It was her mindset. She understood that being a soldier isn't about power. It's about patience, discipline, and heart." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You can train your hands to shoot," he continued, "but real skill comes from your mind." She proved that. She showed us that leadership doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just acts, and others follow. There was a long silence. Then one of the younger soldiers stepped forward and asked quietly, "Sir, do you think we'll ever meet someone like her again?" The commander looked at the rifle, then at the faces around him. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but people like her are rare, and when they come around, they leave a mark that never fades. So no, you don't wait to meet someone like her again. You try to become like her." The team nodded. That moment became a new kind of oath on the base. A promise to carry forward what she had taught them, even if she wasn't there to see it. Months passed and her legend grew. News of her incredible missions reached across branches of the military. Other commanders quoted her words in briefings. Young snipers studied her technique. She had become something bigger than a soldier. She had become a standard. But what made her story even more remarkable was how she continued to live it. She never gave interviews, never accepted fame. She refused medals when they were offered, saying, "Give them to the ones who didn't make it home." That humility touched everyone who heard it. One evening, much later, the commander received another message. It wasn't official, it was personal. A handwritten letter, simple and neat. It was from Alina. She wrote, "Sir, I've been stationed far from base now. Things are different here, but the lessons remain the same. Every time I clean my rifle, I remember that day you stood watching. You once said I aim with my heart. You were right, but it was because people like you taught me how to." She ended the letter with a short line. "Tell the new recruits, never rush a shot. Patience saves lives." The commander folded the letter slowly, feeling a quiet pride in his chest. He looked out at the horizon, the same horizon where she had once practiced, where her bullets had cut through the air with perfect calm. He placed the letter inside her old file and locked it in his desk drawer. Then he picked up her Barrett .50 and hung it on the wall of the training room. Beneath it, he had a small plaque engraved. It read, "Sergeant Alina Torres, the calm behind the scope. Record, 3,347 meters. Legacy, unmeasurable." Every new soldier who entered that room stopped for a moment in front of that rifle. Some whispered her name, some saluted, and every one of them felt the same quiet inspiration, the sense that they were standing in the shadow of someone who had shown what true greatness looked like. As the commander watched them, he realized something important. Legends aren't made from loud victories, they're built from quiet strength, From those who keep going when no one is watching. From those who aim not for glory, but for purpose. And somewhere out there, he knew, Alina Torres was still doing exactly that. Somewhere beyond the hills, watching through her scope, protecting lives with the same calm focus she had always shown. She wasn't chasing records anymore. She was living her purpose. And the SEAL commander, sitting in his office with the wind blowing softly through the tent, smiled as he thought of her. Because in the end, he knew her story wasn't really about a sniper or a shot. It was about the kind of person who proves that quiet courage can echo louder than any explosion, and that true heroes don't need to be seen to be remembered.